This podcast is brought to you by HEC Paris.
Management consulting as a career, the truth, the whole truth, and statistics, meaning what I'm intending to do here is to go through a lot of quantitative data, not rocket science, but there is a fair bit of digging through information on the firms and so on to get to this. But at the end, what are we trying to achieve? It's an independent overview of the industry, majoring on strategy consulting, because strategy consulting is probably where most of you would want to go, but management consulting overall. Independent in that I'm not here representing any particular firm, so no doubt over the next few months you'll be going to presentations by the major firms looking to recruit, and you'll find, to be honest, a lot of them are saying the same thing. There'll just be a different logo in the top corner. It doesn't necessarily tell you what does this firm do different from that one. So we're trying to give an independent view without saying that anyone is particularly good or particularly bad, just give you some data so you can make your own judgment. Consolidate, interpret best available data. You could probably put this presentation together yourself if you spent 3 or 4 weeks surfing the internet, going to every website, phoning up the firms and asking for information and just generally getting a feel for it. What I'm trying to do is to short circuit that for you so you get an understanding of the industry and where you might want to go. Views on how you might segment the industry, what are the developments, where's it going, and some ideas on the selection process and career planning. There is a hard copy of this that I'll leave with the career service, so you don't need to make notes by all means, but you will get a copy of it. The agenda, to run through that quickly: consulting industry, to give some sort of framework to the presentation. I've used a kind of a bastardized Porter 5 Forces model. I don't claim that this is anything terribly profound, it just gives some sort of shape to the presentation. We'll look at consulting as a career choice compared with other things that are probably open to you. How you get into consulting. If you do get in, how do you get out? And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. You will probably find, unless there's an absolute burning issue you want to take at any particular time, that if a question does arise, 1 or 2 slides later on will probably be the answer. So if there's something, by all means interrupt if there's anything you don't understand or it's particularly critical, but otherwise we will have time at the end for particular questions. So kicking off, overview of the global consulting industry, and we're talking the management consulting industry. To start with, this graphic is the world in GDP terms. So the size of the country represents the economy of that country, because quite honestly, economic activity is what drives consulting. And the biggest consulting market is the US, UK, Germany and France, pretty much the next biggest. China is becoming quite significant. The anomaly in there is Japan. I do have views on that if anyone wants to put forward a hypothesis, but there are issues culturally in Japan about taking advice on how to run a business from younger people, which may be the reason that the Japanese consulting industry isn't as big as the economy might suggest. But as a general rule of thumb, economic activity is what drives consulting. If that's the world in GDP terms, then let's have a look at consulting. About half the world's consulting, management consulting, is in the US, 49%. It was over 50% a couple of years back, but obviously the weakening of the dollar means that that's gone down. Europe, not only as the euro strengthened, but the market in Europe has increased. So now about 40% of the global consulting market is within Europe. Asia Pacific growing, rest of the world, which is really, once you've taken that out, South America, about 4%. So that gives you the sort of numbers we're looking at. And if we talk management consulting, excluding pure IT and technology consulting, management consulting, take the 50 largest firms, it's something over 100 billion industry. So the US, rule of thumb, 49 billion, just taking the 50 biggest firms. Pull that into Europe, and the 2 biggest markets are the UK and Germany. Again, it's a reflection to some extent of economy. The UK, because it's kind of the usual offshore aircraft carrier for the American consulting industry to move into Europe. It translates very easily both in terms of culture and language, so therefore the UK was the next biggest market. It is at the moment slightly bigger than the German market. The two vary depending on the strength of the euro against the pound. France, the third biggest market, but you see it's quite a significant reduction by the time you get to France at 12%. But still, we're talking a $100 billion industry, so it's a pretty big market in France. Do you mind if I take my jacket off again? Okay, so that's sort of size of the various markets, an idea of it. Wrong. If we relate that to percentage of GDP, okay, it may not be mega, but overall across Europe, consulting is about 0.46, 0.45% of GDP on average, but with quite significant variations. The US consulting is over 1% of GDP. So if you're looking at headroom for growth, okay, the UK is pretty heavily consulted. Surprisingly, so is Portugal. But you can see France, Germany, and so on, there's still quite a lot of growth opportunity there. Part of the anomalies that you'll see here are to do with the fact that the major consulting firms are going to be charging pretty much similar rates, whichever economy they're working in. So McKinsey are not going to cut their rates by 50% because they're working in Portugal. If you want McKinsey, you pay McKinsey rates, and consequently you'll get something of a distortion there in terms of percentage of GDP. For those that want the specific numbers for France, these are 2004-5 data. Just to give you an idea of the market, 5.9 billion euros in management consulting, which was 12.2% of the European market. Growth rates, consulting as a percent of GDP, our average was 0.45, so France is below the European average in terms of consulting. Number of firms, 5,500. Just dwell on that for a moment, because no doubt toward the end of the presentation, people will be saying, well, what's a good firm that does a lot in terms of pharmaceuticals? Folks, there are 5,500 firms just in France. I don't know. I can give you the headline on who are the major players globally, maybe some of the specific ones in Europe, but you know, work the numbers here. You've got lots of firms of maybe half a dozen people. I really don't know them all, and the opportunity to find out is there. But we can talk about some of the major players. Revenue per consultant, the average, 195,000 euros per consultant. So if you do go it alone, this is not a bad business to be in. I did say there were a lot of numbers in this. For those that want it, here is the comparison France, Germany, UK, which we said were the three biggest consulting markets in Europe. UK is the biggest in terms of consulting, marginally bigger than Germany. But if you take the GDP and the population of those three countries, reasonably consistent in size, and consulting companies in Europe, 60,000, that FIACO, the European Federation of Management Consulting, recognises and are members. Again, there are probably a lot more than that one-man bands that set themselves up and say, I'm a management consultant, but of firms recognised by FIACO, 60,000 across Europe. 315,000 consultants, and the consulting density, consultants per million of population, which is again a useful number. UK, again, vastly over-consulted compared with France.
And it's crazy, it's 72% gross consulting in UK.
Consulting growth 7.2 for UK, yeah. It took a dip, and we'll see those numbers in a couple of slides where the market went down, but when it recovers, in the UK and US certainly, it recovers very quickly. And yeah, 7.2% year-on-year growth. In fact, if we look at the growth of the management consulting industry over the last 15 years, we've got a compound growth rate of 12.5%, which is quite healthy. And I'm sure if any of their clients were achieving that kind of year-on-year growth, they'd be quite happy. So global revenue, again, taking the largest firms, going up to something like 80, 90 billion. But you'll notice this is not a linear growth. It started back in 90, 15 billion or so, okay, inflation, whatever else, but we've got some pretty big numbers at the end. But you notice 02, 03, there are some blips in the graph, and if we take that out to a year-on-year figure, this is what you see. So our 12.5% average, there have been some outstanding years, and 02, 03 into 04, what's euphemistically known as negative growth, but picking up. Okay, so we're seeing that it's a very healthy long-term industry, but it has some very significant ups and downs. In fact, if we look at that dip in 02, 03, even some of the major players experienced some quite dramatic drops in revenue. Now, health warning here on the numbers. Consulting firms are very secretive about their numbers. If it's a public company, if it's an Accenture or an Atos, they have to publish it. But the partnerships are very secretive, and a lot of the figures are approximate. And we'll see later on how you can maybe dig into some of those. But the firms may say, we have 6,000 people, when it suits them to say we've got a lot of people. But at other times, how many consultants have we got? Because it raises the revenue per consultant number, then, well, it's quite a bit less. But in this particular year, quite a number of firms, if they didn't publish, at least it was possible to determine what was happening. And you see people like even Accenture, who switched heavily into outsourcing in 02, 03 in order to maintain revenues, had a 10% year-on-year drop. A.T. Kearney, 10%, AMS, minus 17, Bearing Point down 7, even McKinsey down 3.5% that they admitted to. 02, 03, the partners of McKinsey had 2 cash calls. That is, if you're a partnership and there's more money going out than coming in, there aren't too many places, there aren't huge financial reserves, there aren't bank loans you can pull down, you can't go to the shareholders. Effectively, the partners have to dig into their pocket. And that hurts. When they've been stashing it away for a few years, a cash call is quite a significant event for a consulting firm. That was 03. If you then look at 04, things pick up. Accenture then stabilised. AMS didn't, it got itself acquired, but that was the one that had 17% drop. ATK still going backwards, but we'll come on to what happened with AT Kearney. They bought themselves out of EDS. So actually this worked in their favour. But if you look down here, we've now got the Deloittes, the Diamond Clusters, IBM and McKinsey starting to turn the corner. So by 04, things were getting better. If we take that original graph of the development of consulting revenues and overlay it with global GDP, you can see there's actually a pretty strong correlation. Okay, different scale, but there's a degree of lag in consulting over GDP, but pretty much you can see when the economy picks up, consulting picks up. When the economy goes into a recession, consulting suffers quite badly. That we can see quite clearly here over this 15-year time horizon, but the message that comes through here is the sort of consulting that people buy depends on what's happening in the economy. So if you look at our graph again, when the market's in downturn, when the economy is in downturn, people want cost reduction. This tends to be things like what in Booz Allen is called POP consulting, people off payroll. It's cost reduction, it's HR type consulting, it's downsizing, it's relocating. It's not the kind of stuff that you see in the upcycle, the growth, the big M&A activity, the long-term strategic plan. When the market's going down, what are we going to do in 5 to 6 years' time? It's probably the last thing on your mind. It's survival. So the consulting market swings into cost reduction mode. In upturn, it goes into the growth, the long-term strategy, the big infrastructure type programs. We're now coming out of that downturn. Things are picking up. What do we see happening? Well, if we go back to year 2000 and come on through for a few years there, you can see the blue items here, which are these the growth areas. So this is IT, big investment in large-scale IT projects, new systems, corporate strategy work, declining. The things which are essentially directed around cost reduction, operations management, outsourcing and HR growing quite significantly, up to 2003. So it looked at that point as if outsourcing was going to be the saviour of consulting, and all the jobs are going to be shipped off to whether it's India, China, Poland, whatever. You may regard this as good news if you look at what's happened in America over the last couple of years. Given that America tends to set the trend for what happens elsewhere in consulting, the new outsourcing contracts in the US have been in significant decline for the last few years, picking up in Europe, but this is the trendsetter, and less new outsourcing contracts are appearing, which I am slightly gratified about, because it's to see consulting remaining just as a bit of strategy work in Europe and all the work going elsewhere was not terribly encouraging. Okay, that's a kind of a global picture of how big is the market, where's it come from, where's it going in big number terms. Let's have a look at the demand side. Who's actually buying consulting and what is it they're buying? This is a breakdown of the service, the clients for consulting by their industry. Financial services and government are the biggest. Pretty much reflects the size of the industry, maybe no major surprises there. But if you bear in mind we were talking about this $100 billion industry, then even the minor elements like pharma and healthcare, $3 billion of consulting revenue. So whatever your background, before you came on the programme here, whatever industry you came out of, you can be pretty sure that there's several $1 billion worth of consulting going on in that industry. So it's worth, if you're looking to get into consulting, to leverage that knowledge, because there will be a number of firms who are seeking the skills that you've got. So that's something to log there. If we look at what's been growing, certainly from the UK point of view, no surprise here. These are global numbers, but healthcare and public sector have been the big growth areas of the last couple of years. And as I say, from the UK point of view, the money that's been poured into big IT infrastructure projects by the government, the money that's been poured in the health service, a lot of it going the way of management consultants. No surprise to see that those areas have been the highest growth over the last few years. But even so, some of the others are still quite significant. Comms and media, telecommunications, you'll notice zero. This is a big reversal, because up around 2000, 2001, telecom was the real boom sector. And you remember everyone pouring billions into buying 3G licenses and then finding they couldn't sell any of the services to anybody. So telecom and media consulting has died down a bit of late. In terms of what these people are actually buying, taking it broadly into four areas, which we can call the strategy type areas: operations, IT and other, just because I couldn't think of a generic head. So strategy, the stuff like strategic planning, M&A, high-level financial advisory, something around 16% of the total consulting market of our $100 billion. IT, and this is management consulting on systems and technology. It's not IT consulting as such. It's not writing code and programming. It's about how are you going to utilize information technology in your business. How can you change your business around the information that SAP can give you? HR about 11%, outsourcing dramatic there at 20%, and then the things that are designated as operations, these are not absolutely definitive. What other people may call strategy, we may put into something like project management. But this is a pretty good steer as to what are the areas of management consulting, and as you say, strategy there about 16%, the area that probably most of you would be interested in, or potentially operations. Now, having said that, we've seen who's buying and what they're buying. So I know you'll have 2x2 matrices, so let's have a 2x2 matrix. We can now set out as a way of segmenting the industry, range of services offered and range of industries served, number of industries served. And here we start to get a shape of industry that enables us to put some tags on the different type of firms. Up in the top corner there, the full service firms, the ones that used to be the accountancy-based firms back in the days when it was KPMG, Ernst & Young, Arthur Andersen, and they had consulting groups. Now that a lot of them have changed their name, and again we'll touch on this in a moment, we can still regard people like Accenture, Capgemini, Atos, Bearing Point as being full service firms. They can offer strategy, they can offer implementation, they can even offer IT and writing the code for you, which tends to mean they are big and they cover all industries. There are some industry specialists, firms that say we focus on a particular industry and we do everything within that. It tends to be a bit unusual because if you have capability to do strategy and operations and IT within the healthcare sector, then you can probably do the same in other sectors. So it's not an obvious area, but there are firms that sit in that sector. So to give you a few, Oliver Wyman, or it's now called Mercer Oliver Wyman, which is used to work in financial services. So Autopolis, as the name suggests, automotive specialist. Kurt Salmon tends to work a lot in retail, also some pharmaceutical. And there are a number that work in telecom still, specialists. You may know Greenwich Consulting, based in Paris. And a couple of spin-outs from Cluster Consulting, which was a mobile telco specialist, Valoris and Delta Partners, telco specialists. So there are firms within the industry specialists. More so functional specialists, people say we know everything there is to know about HR. So people like Hay, Watson Wyatt, very strong on compensation and benefits. Mercer Delta is another one that's very into HR. Mercer tends to buy firms but keep their individual identity. So Mercer Delta was Delta Consulting, working with CEOs on things like corporate development, executive coaching, things of that sort. ZS, founded by, I can't remember the names, but Z and S were two professors at Kellogg. Marketing professors. So ZS, not surprisingly, is a marketing specialist firm. Cartesis, also based in Paris, works almost exclusively for finance directors in putting systems in for, I think their clients include something like 37 of the CAC 40, and now increasingly they're getting into the Global 500. So very much sector specialists. Strategy firms are a sort of functional specialist. Strategy, yeah, it's a bit broader than a pure function. It has a broader implication, but we'll sit those there. And strategy boutiques, which tend to be either the partners of a strategy firm, a couple of them thinking, well, actually we can make more money if we went independent, or we don't need all this corporate stuff with working for a big firm. We'd have more fun doing it ourselves. So they'll break out and form a boutique. Or conversely, it may be the guru. Quite often these are university professors, particularly in Germany, but people like ZS or Michael Porter, same kind of thing, that form their own consulting specialism, and it grows to the size where it becomes a boutique. So two ways of getting the boutique firms. And a third dimension that can come on there is necessarily the bigger the capacity, capability you've got, the bigger the firm is going to be. So the one man and his dog down here, the industry guru, the person that's a top university specialist, may only be a couple of people. The full range firms, the IBMs, Accenture, 60 to 80,000 people. That's one way of assessing the firms and getting an idea of size. The other thing is the revenue. Now, My earlier health warning about the sensitivity that firms have on the numbers applies here, but since the scale here gets so small, it probably doesn't matter too much. But if we look at something like an IBM business consulting service, $14 billion reported last year. Accenture, 8.3 billion. Deloitte Consulting, Capgemini, still in the billions of dollars. On down, this is not intended to be totally comprehensive, but just some of the names that you've probably come across in your research. Celerant, Diamond Consulting, PRTM, LEK, things that effectively are just a flat line down at the end of the graph, at the order of maybe $60 to $100 million of revenue. And you may question, well, why do we even put them on the graph if they're that small? Okay, bear with me. These are revenues for 0405. The other measure that we can put on there is the number of consultants. And again, we've got a general downward trend here. IBM Business Consulting Services, something around 65,000 consultants. Accenture, about 60,000. There seems to be some kind of cap at 60,000. I don't know whether a firm becomes unmanageable beyond that, but 60,000, 30,000 with the Deloittes and Capgeminis. And again, we've got our flat line down the end there, firms that have got of the order of hundreds sometimes of consultants, which again may lead you to say, well, that's barely worth talking about alongside the IBMs and the Accentures. But I would point out to you, for example, if you get to McKinsey here, you'll see we have this general slope down and then suddenly it takes a dip for McKinsey. We've got the revenues, we've got the number of consultants. It enables us to work out a critical measure of consulting, which is revenue per consultant. Notice the flat line down the end there are the firms that barely appear on the graph, and then work out revenue per consultant, and you find we get a completely different picture. McKinsey, pretty much the market leader, and actually Maricon make more, but numbers of the order of $500,000, $550,000 per consultant. It just slips off the tongue, think about it. $550,000 per year per consultant they're being billed at. Boston Consulting Group, Bain, and those non-entities down the end there, Mars, Maricon, LEK, Diamond Cluster, all up around $350,000, $400,000 per consultant. And again, the health warning on these numbers, if you just go to the Booz Allen website, this is what you'll get in terms of revenue per consultant. It's a distortion because everybody that works for Booz Allen is included in there. And the vast majority of people that work at Booz work on US government contracts. The strategy bit is about 3,000 people within that group, and they are radically different from the number you'll see here. So, revenue per consultant, key measure in the industry, enables us to produce yet another 2x2, and this one is one we will be referring back to because it gives us a kind of a generic designation of the consulting industry. If we do a logarithmic line along there of number of consultants, take a break at about 1,000. And here, revenue per consultant breaking at about 300,000. We find the firms drop nicely into boxes, which are, these are the full service firms. The Accenture, Capgemini, Bearing Point, IBM. Something around anything from maybe $130,000 to $240,000 per consultant, but anything up to 60,000, 70,000 people. Top corner, what I always call the B's and M's, and you can see why. Bain, Booz, Berger, BCG, Monitor, Mercer, McKinsey, Maricon. If you want to start a strategy firm, I suggest you choose either of those initials for your new firm. It seems to work. So the B's and M's are the mainstream strat firms that you'll know about, and up here, the boutiques, most of them spin-offs from the majors. Jean Estin, who's a HEC alum, by the way, was the European head for Mercer Management Consulting, went off and did his own thing. CVA were Booz and McKinsey people that broke out. LEK, a couple of Bain guys. OC&C, Outram Cullinan and Company. So generally spin-outs from the strat firms where they say, well, we can do this work, we've got loyal clients, we move out, we do our own thing, we lose some of the overhead, we lose some of the politics, we'll have more fun. So boutiques can be every bit as interesting and sometimes more interesting than a mainstream firm because you get a bigger variety of client. You don't get the degree of specialism, so you have to weigh the balance. But this is a nice way of segmenting the industry. This bottom corner here, it's the usual bottom corner issue with any 2x2. These are firms of less than 1,000 people and less than $300,000 per consultant. Unless it's a startup and is really going somewhere, you probably aren't too interested in the firms in here, which is why I'm not bothered putting any in. There's an issue in here which is, as a broad generalization, what is the client buying for all this money? What is it they're getting? Well, down here, you're buying experience. You want to put in a new HR system. You don't need to crack the atom. Other people have done it. You just want to learn from what's happened before, not make the same mistakes. So you go along, you buy the skill of experience, which doesn't enable you to charge as much as the people up here that are saying, we don't want yesterday's solutions. We want blue sky thinking. We want innovation. We want creativity. We want to do things different. So the strategy people up here are the ones that are charging the top dollar. And if you want a broad description of what are you getting from between the difference here, or what does the client think they're getting, experience versus innovation, is a good generalization for what you're getting. Now, having said that, again, another but. Having set this threshold at 300,000, saying, okay, we look at that and you can just quickly say, all right, this is a strategy firm, this one isn't, because it's only doing 140,000. Well, again, the health warning, if you break down the work of the various firms, certainly IBM, huge tranche of what they do, as you'd expect from IBM, is to do with technology consulting. It's to do with IT advice and putting in a new system. And then there's a fair bit of ops management, and strategy is a little blip at the bottom. Whereas a Monitor and an LEK and a BCG, almost entirely strategy. So you get the high numbers out of those firms. But if you strip out just the strategy, you'll find that firms like IBM and Accenture actually have as big a strategy practice as a McKinsey or a BCG. So if your interest is in strategy, don't think you can only go to a McKinsey, a Bain, a BCG or a Booz Allen, because the strat services practice of Accenture or the strategy group in IBM tends to be staffed at the top level by escapees from the B's and M's. So don't dismiss the full service players as being necessarily lower down the food chain. Are we okay so far? It's very quiet, isn't it? Yeah, right. Okay, we've taken a general overview of the market. We've looked at how we can segment the industry. Let's look at the alternatives providers and new entrants using my approximation to a five forces model. Okay, who are the alternative providers and new entrants? Another sort of map of the universe in consulting. We could say, or I'm choosing to say, we've got a continuum from strategy, where is the business going, operations, how do we do it, IT, what are the tools and techniques that will help us do that. And you can position the major players somewhere on this continuum. So the B's and M's up here in strategy with a bit of operations. Partly because the clients say, well, this is a wonderful report, thank you very much, what do I do now? So there's a degree of pressure from the clients to force these people to move down into operations. And certainly over the last couple of years, when there wasn't that much strategy work around, a lot of them said, well, we can do implementation as well. So they were forcing themselves down into operations. The big players sitting here in the middle, the Capgemini, Deloitte, Accenture, they do have strategy, not as pure as the B's and M's, but they can operate there. And certainly they have capability in technology. And down in the IT, the EDS, CSC, IBMs, traditionally seen as maybe software providers or systems providers, or in IBM case, hardware providers, and looking at the kind of money these people are coining and saying, we'd like a slice of that. So progressively trying to move up. But it's a lot harder to move in this direction than it is in that direction. Although, of course, you may be diluting the brand. If we look at the background to what was happening, going back up to about year 2000, we saw, in fact, it was 12.5% growth, I said, over 15 years. This was the peak growth period. We were seeing 15% year-on-year growth during this period. And of that, what we call, if I'm using the term too loosely, the big five. What was the Andersen, the KPMG, the EY, and the others, were taking progressively larger share of that growing cake. It was a one-stop shop. It appealed to people. I can go there, I know who they are, they know my business, they come in, they do the original strategy work, and then they help me on the implementation, and they can see the thing the whole way through. They've got a range of people, great. So you were seeing that the one-stop shop, the big five, seemed to be the way to go. But then we had a few problems. Regulatory and economic pressures. Sarbanes-Oxley, in essence. There were perceived conflicts of interest between auditing and consulting to the same firm. Particularly during these years of the dot-com boom, when sometimes the consulting firm would go in and take stock in part payment for their consulting fees, and then that firm was audited and a valuation put on that stock by the audit side of the business. That was seen as being possibly open to abuse. Initially, there was a degree of pressure for the firms to split out their audit from their consulting. Appointment of George W. Bush, that was all put on hold. Things were okay. Up until the time a guy called Jeff Skilling came up with a neat idea to sell the debt of a firm called Enron to some offshore enterprises owned nominally by his wife, but off the balance sheet. Skilling, an ex-McKinsey consultant, by the way. And it was a very clever scheme, but it was seen as being perhaps the ultimate example of audit and advisory needing to split. So you got your Sarbanes-Oxley, and generally speaking, the firms took it upon themselves to split out the two businesses. It was also, to an extent, some economic pressure, because once firms started to, someone like values were being put on the Arthur Andersen Consulting, as it was called before it became Accenture, of billions of dollars, then the partners in the other firms were thinking, this looks interesting. Maybe we should be doing the same thing. Maybe we should be hiving off the consulting business and trousering a few billion. Sounds like a good idea. So it wasn't only regulatory, there were some economic pressures as well. But if you look at what happened to the big five, Andersen, okay, it's history now, but it split into what was Accenture and Arthur Andersen. Accenture then did a partial IPO, about 40% of their stock, and managed to produce 7.5 billion. Ernst & Young split out their advisory, which was then bought by Capgemini, at that point to form CGEY, and now it's just Capgemini again, so E&Y has disappeared. KPMG went to various areas. There is still some KPMG consulting. There is Atos Origin, there is Bearing Point. PwC split out. For about 3 days it was called Monday, and then IBM bought it. Deloitte Touche were just on the point of splitting out their consulting, and they were even going to brand it as Braxton, which was their old strategy firm. But the market had turned down by that point, and it didn't seem like such a good idea. So Deloitte is the only firm now that still has audit and consulting, but it endeavours to keep them strictly separate. So you don't consult to an audit client. And a number of the names that were major in the industry either disappeared or shrank very significantly. Arthur Andersen disappeared completely. Arthur D. Little all but disappeared. It is now recovering. It's always been very strong in Europe, but it was always driven out of the US. The European bit of ADL, which is now owned by Altran, is actually doing quite well. E&Y we've seen disappeared, KPMG fragmented. These things like March 1st, Mitch Mad, Razorfish, Scient, Viant, who were on the point of taking over firms like Booz Allen at one point, all but disappeared, consolidated into one. And PwC, as we said, went into IBM. The technology firms, who we saw earlier, like to move up the food chain, have become quite acquisitive. Altran bought ADL. Atos bought KPMG's UK consulting and Dutch consulting, and bought Schlumberger Consulting. Capgemini, Cisco Systems, we can go on down. Datatech bought Analysis last year. Daimler bought Cluster, EDS, ATK. So there is the move to try and get up the food chain by acquiring a consulting firm. Not all of them have been successful. EDS have since sold A.T. Kearney. Diamond and Cluster have parted ways. Celerant have bought themselves out of Novell. It's difficult to get the culture fit in these things. Consulting acquisitions are even less successful generally than most other acquisitions. But what do we know? Well, the audit firms, having got out of consulting, have found that there is still a requirement for advisory services. Not consulting, you understand, because that would be a conflict of interest, but advisory services. So Deloitte, which still has consulting, is doing $7.6 billion worth of advisory services, but KPMG, which sold off its consulting, is now doing $4.5 billion. PwC, $3 billion. So this is an interesting resurgence of the audit firms being careful about what they advise in, and because of some of the clauses on the sale saying it's not consulting, but you have some pretty sizable numbers there.
So in reality, in operation, what's the difference between so-called consulting service and their advisory services?
I don't know. Anybody know what the difference is? It's.
I mean, they must be careful to avoid the legal issues.
Of course.
So
I mean,
how can they do it?
Well, if they don't advise on something which would affect anything to do with audit, they restrict their range of services. So, for example, with PwC, they're very strong in corporate finance. So it's not audit, but it is corporate advisory. So M&A work, corporate restructuring, but the people in PwC's corporate finance team are all Strat consultants, but they don't call it consulting as such, but it is. Right, so that's who's buying the services. Let's look at the supply side. For a consulting firm, the raw material is MBA graduates or first degree graduates. So supply side, and apologies for the approximations here. The consulting industry, the management consulting industry, typically recruits, and they're taking the most recent numbers, 28% of the graduates from top B schools. And for the top B schools, I'm using here kind of the top 20 and the top 8 or 9 in Europe, including, so that will be HSA, INSEAD, ISADA, ESA, London, IMD, RSM. Yep. So what you would hopefully regard as being the top schools. Okay, it varies year on year, but generally speaking, something around 30%-ish of MBAs from top B schools go into management consulting. Over the last couple of years, that has gone down a bit because getting into the industry has been increasingly difficult. We saw the industry experiences negative growth. A lovely phrase, they were making losses. The market turned down as a result. Those already in consulting were reluctant to leave, particularly in strategy. And again, we'll pick up on this later, the half-life of a management consultant is about 4 to 5 years. So you get a constant churn. Firms have geared themselves up for a growth rate of maybe 15-16% plus an attrition of about 20%, which meant they had a huge need to bring people in. When that cut, then the business schools certainly noticed because there weren't the big recruitment numbers. Some leading firms, utilisation rates below 50%. That is, more than half the people on your books are what they call on the beach. They're taking garden leave or they're tidying their desks. So it's yeah. So only half of them out being billed. A lot of the dot-com refugees, people who come out of consulting, return to the market, and because they're experienced consultants, they were given, in some cases, precedence over people fresh out of B school. If you'd not been in consulting before, well, here we've got a plug-and-play person rather than someone out of B school. So, well, we'll take back the dot-com refugee. And because the recruitment targets were that much lower, and in some cases zero, the firms backed off their presence on campus. So just a nominal presence to let you know they're still there. Yeah.
These are from recent surveys?
This is the up to about 03. Yeah, I've got the numbers on that. Don't worry. This was getting into consulting suddenly lost its appeal. So it was not the hot thing that it was. This is not absolute numbers. This is taking a sample of the top firms, top 25 schools, designated firms within the top 10 recruiters. So it gives you an indicator. 2001 was a peak. And if you remember from that earlier graph, 2001 was the peak of the industry. Look how much it dropped in 02, 03. The good news, 04, 05, 06, it's picked up quite significantly. It hasn't adopted the bubble type position that we saw in 01, these huge numbers, but it is back up almost to the level of 2000, which is realistic and very healthy. Not all the numbers are in for 06, but it's probably down slightly from 05, but it's certainly a lot. It's picked up in the last 2 years very dramatically. So, yeah. If we look at where they recruit from, taking again a sample of the firms, the majority come out of the US schools. So in the case of Monitor, almost all their recruitment of those top 25, where they are in the top 10 recruiters, were US, BCG, a bit more egalitarian, AZK and so on. So yes, the bad news, if you like, is most of the recruitment is done from US schools. Why? Well, if you look at the numbers coming out of US schools, Harvard, Wharton, Columbia, 700, 800, 900 MBAs a year, down to about 300, 400 for the UCLAs and Cornell. European schools, with the exception of INSEAD, are generally much smaller. So, the simple math. You're looking to, you've got a $10 million recruitment budget, you're looking to take on 50 MBAs, as Willie Sutton said, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Why do the firms go to the US schools, first of all? Because that's where the big numbers are. So, that's the bad news. The good news, and there is good news, if you remember, 39% of the global consulting market is in Europe. And certainly not 39% of the MBA graduates are coming out of Europe. So what we see is a significantly higher proportion of MBAs from European schools going to consulting than from the US. And in fact, if you look at the 02 to 06 numbers, you'll see that the decline for Europe, well, in fact, you don't see it at all. It was pretty static. It's the US that got hit the hardest when the recession came in. Europe is a big market for consulting. There aren't enough MBAs to go around. There's strong competition. Right, supply side. Are you sure this is what how do you get in? Well, the fact that you're here means you're probably interested in consulting. You're not alone. If we look at the preferred employer of choice of MBA graduates in both the US and Europe, in the most recent Universum surveys, we find McKinsey, Bain, BCG, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Booz, okay. globally, strat consulting firms are seen as being the place you want to get into. We shall revisit this shortly. So you're not alone. People are interested in getting in consulting for all the reasons that it probably brought you here. It's the intellectual challenge, it's exposure to the kind of stuff you read about in the FT every day, it's working with top quality people, you're developing and learning the whole time, you're progressing, the sheer quality of people you meet, and if you decide to go for consulting, the interview process, you'll find they are really sharp cookies. Predictable career track, and rumour has it, it doesn't pay too badly. Predictable career track. Again, let's get some generic headings in here so you understand what we're talking about. This is a classic career track in consulting from first degree entry, graduate, a title which will either be business analyst or research analyst. This is the grunt work, this is the number crunching, the phoning up, the basic research, and for maybe 3 years of heavy duty learning how things work. By which time you probably do think, time to put my feet up a bit, I know I'll go off and do an MBA. So you take the couple of years of, take the MBA career break. Whether or not you've been through the research analyst, the entry point post MBA is consultant. Different titles, again, we'll touch on that in a moment, but effectively you come out of MBA as a fully fledged consultant, doing pretty much the same work here, only on a slightly higher level. Assuming that you survive a couple of years as a consultant, you might make the step to the next level, which is the manager. Now you're running small projects, you've got maybe a couple of consultants, a couple of analysts working on the project with you, you'll be doing the presentations to the client, and you'll be learning new things in terms of managing a professional services team. If after a couple of years of that you still made the grade, the next step is senior manager or principal. Now you're running several projects, some maybe directly, but others via managers. You will even start to sell on work. So the client comes back, they're happy with that, what do I do next? Well, let me sell you another couple of $1,000s worth of work. And at principal level, you're starting then to develop a client base. A couple of years as principal, maybe you've started to build significant revenues, you've got clients, and you haven't upset too many people at the top of the tree. You might be elected to the partnership. And there you're now a revenue generator full time. Except it's not quite the top of the tree. We also do, sorry, I should have said right at the outset, the major activity of Vencon Research is salary information and benefits information for the consulting firms. So not all of them in every country, but we now work for effectively every firm we've talked about in the presentations through those. And partner is not a single band. One of the firms has 13 levels of partner. So you haven't got to the top of the tree, you've just moved over to another tree. However, the guy holding the banknotes there is probably not too far off. So these are, if you like, generic, your career track, fairly predictable, analyst, consultant, manager, principal, partner. The different firms have different titles, but the structure is essentially the same for all. First degree entry, MBA, MBA entry, manager, senior manager, partner. Do bear in mind, if you're offered a job, and I did interview someone once who had an offer from both McKinsey and Gemini, and because the McKinsey one was an associate and the Gemini one was a senior consultant, they took the Gemini offer believing it to be more senior. It was just a different badge for that same position. So unless you're coming in with some very significant experience and probably previous consulting experience, you will not come in as a manager, even if you've been a manager in industry before. Managing a consulting team is radically different, and you need to understand what the consulting business is about before you make that step. We did mention, allegedly it's not too badly paid. These are smoothed and disguised and everything else numbers, because obviously if people are going to pay me huge sums of money to know this information, I'm not going to give it to you. But nonetheless, these are the tracks for half a dozen or 8 8 countries, of consultants from first degree entry up to principal level, not partner. We do have the partner data, but you need a log scale on here to put it on. So by the time you get up to principal level, at the moment the UK highest paid something not far short of 300,000 euros. Germany, France, not that different. There are some interesting features that come out of here. For example, the bottom line here is India. And the ratio between India analyst entry and Germany, which is the highest paid, is 8 to 1. By the time you get to principal, it's 2 to 1. So it's actually a reasonably egalitarian business once you get further up. And by the time you get to partner, it's almost consistent, because a partner in a consulting firm can really work and live pretty much where they want. If they're a successful pharmaceutical consulting partner in the US, they can do the same thing in Europe or in the Far East. So those lines are trending together. In terms of time scale, 8 times and 2.5 times. All right. In terms of timescale, these are numbers from last year. This is UK data, but it's the same. I checked just before I came in. The same for Germany, pretty much the same for France. This is excluding the time spent on the MBA program, the time to get to from first degree entry to partner in a range of firms. And it can be anything from 8 years as the minimum to 20 years as a maximum.
Whatever the experience you had before the MBA?
Generally, that won't make any difference. It means you'll be coming in somewhere around here. If you've been recruited as a consultant, you're a consultant. But this is assuming you spend your entire career in consulting. How long from first degree, excluding the MBA, to get to partner? Sorry, there was a question there?
Yeah, actually we had a BCD presentation and the lady told that if you are experienced.
Sorry, if
you're experienced.
Yeah, what, in consulting or elsewhere?
Elsewhere.
You will still come in as a consultant somewhere around here in any of the firms. If you have particularly relevant experience in a hard to find sector, you may get accelerated track to manager, but you will not be appointed as a manager at the outset, because simply you haven't done the consulting to know what it is you're managing.
It seems that there's like a rule of thumb that says that if you don't come from a consulting business, you have to divide by 2 your experience, what's your actual experience in the strategy firm.
Haven't heard that.
I've said like 2 or 3 times.
If a firm is recruiting from a B school and it has someone that has already worked in consulting, then clearly they will have a certain favour, because they know how to consult. They can survive in the kind of environment you're talking about. They know how to work with clients. You've got a plug and play person rather than someone that's going to spend the first 3 or 4 months learning the ropes. So that does give an advantage on the recruitment side, but in terms of getting up to speed, I've not come across that as being an issue that the experience is discounted so heavily. Yeah, there is a preference if you've some consulting experience in previously. The reason for the difference here, by the way, remember we had 3 different groups of firms. We had the big firms with 60, 70,000 people. We had the boutiques with a couple of hundred, and we had the B's and M's with maybe a couple of thousand. And you can perhaps start to guess which firm is which on here. You know, it's not going to take you 20 years to make partner in a boutique. One other observation here: these numbers have all increased by about 2 years in the last 3 to 4 years. It's taking longer to get through, and part of that was this hiatus that occurred a couple of years ago. People weren't being promoted, so there wasn't the work there that meant you had the surge through the every 2 years people get promoted. So either they left the firm or they stayed where they were. So you've extended this period. All the same, if you look at how long it might take to make partner, from a minimum of 8 to a maximum of 20 years we're looking at in there. So that means in a boutique, you could probably make partner before 35, early 30s potentially. Strat partner, mid 30s, and an IT partner, late 30s. Rule of thumb, just to give an idea of the sort of marker of how quickly you can progress if you stay the course. Let me just go back. Further observation on here, since we do salary surveys for all the consulting firms, something which has been, did a trip to the States recently, and almost every firm, they're asking the same questions about China, India and the UAE. Those are the hot areas. Because they're all in India and China, they're opening up global development centres, and the UAE seems to be where everyone wants to go, even though I'm not sure what they're consulting in. If you take somewhere like Dubai, there are twice as many mobile phones as there are people in Dubai. So I don't know if they're still consulting, and they've got the world's biggest everything. They've got 4 international airlines, but UAE, everyone's in Dubai trying to sell consulting. Okay. India, a lot of the issue seems to be the wage inflation at the bottom end. Year on year, 06 over 05 was 18%. Now, if you think a lot of the work in India was outsourcing, having work that was previously being done in the States or Europe and now being done at lower cost in India, people don't outsource their finance department or their HR for 6 months. They do it on a 3 to 4 year, maybe 5 year contract. 18% year on year salary inflation over a 5 year contract knocks a big hole in your economics. And that's one of the things that they were concerned about. Okay. Again, trying to preempt some of the questions. Often get asked, what about the difference between Booz Allen and BCG, or between Mercer and Bain? If you talk to people within the firms, they will always say, well, we're a much more collegiate, we have more away days. To be honest, if you've not been in consulting, there isn't a great deal of difference between similar types of firms. When you get in it, you will find some marginal differences, but to an outside observer, there isn't a great deal of difference. Where you would see a difference, obviously, is between a boutique and a B&M and a major, but that's a function of size. If you're in a boutique, you know everyone by their first name, and everyone knows you. If you're in a B&M, you know the people in the office. If you're in an IBM or an Accenture, well, you know, the phone book is that thick. So it's the same difference you'd find in any other industry, just as a sheer function of the size. Some are more social and informal than others by virtue of the sort of business it is. To be honest, I found geography and national culture are at least as significant as the difference between firms. And the example of this was when I did some work for Mercer, both in their London office and their Paris office. There was more difference between Mercer's London and Paris office than there was between Mercer in London and Booz Allen in London. And you can probably understand that in terms of the cultural aspects of working in Paris versus London. That although it still adopts the US first name mentality, the underlying style is not first name in Paris. The other difference you'll find is depending on the type of work you're doing, and quite honestly, if you're working in something like M&A, and the deal is going to be announced to the stock market at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, you will be working that weekend. No two ways about it. It's not 5:30, sorry, I've got something booked for this evening. You know, when a deal like that goes down, you'll be working on it, and you'll be working till probably 2 in the morning on Sunday. That's just the nature of the beast. And talk to people who've worked with AEK that does a lot of M&A work, and you'll know that's the case. Whereas if you're doing something like restructuring, which will be maybe an 18-month or 2-year project, working with the client on client site. You can't do too much restructuring when everyone's gone home. So you will work pretty much client hours. So that's a function of the sort of work. How do you get an offer, assuming by this stage you still have some interest in doing so? Well, if we look at the sort of characteristics that the firms lay down, and again, you can go onto their websites and find what we're looking for is assertiveness, creativity, someone who's really good on the analytics, independent, has commercial acumen, they've got good listening skills, logical thinker, conceptual, they're a team player, academic. These are all the kind of phrases you'll find anywhere. And then you put them alongside each other and you say, okay, we're looking for the independent team player. Yeah, okay. We're looking for the creative logician, the assertive listener. There are some huge contradictions here, but the fact is, if you're going to be in particularly a strat firm, you do need to be able to adopt different skills at different times. You do need to demonstrate your listening skills. You do need to be able to make your point. You do need to be logical and creative. So the person they're looking for, this is the role model. How do they make the decisions? Okay, where is the information coming from? Basic factual data. This is the stuff on your resume in the profile book. You can't do anything about it. It's history, but it's what degree do you get, what languages do you speak, what industry have you worked in, and even as we speak, on Avenue of the Americas and South Wacker Drive, there are a team sitting in offices going through all the profile books of all the top B schools saying, that one there, and they'll put a yellow sticky on it, that's someone we want to call for interview. This is going on all the time, through thousands. We can touch on what you need to get in the resume later if you wish, but it's important that you understand what they're looking for and what are the things they'll pick up when they go through the profile. One of the main things is achievement. The nature of consultants is they are driven, they are achievers. Whatever they do, they want to succeed at it. If you play a musical instrument, you do it to grade 5 or whatever. If you climb rocks, you have climbed Kilimanjaro. If you play a sport, you were the school captain. It's the kind of thing that says, this is someone, whatever they attempt, they really go for it. So exceptional professional, sporting, commercial, whatever it is, they're looking for something that says driven person, someone who is self-motivated and won't accept second best. Fit. Is this some people like us? Had one consultant explain to me as the airport test. 2 ways of looking at it. You're at the airport, you're waiting for your flight to New York. The announcement comes on, the flight's delayed for an hour and a half. Is this the person that you say, let's go and get a coffee? Or, well, I'll see you in an hour and a half, I'm off to the bookshop. Is it someone you would want to be strapped next to on a 7-hour flight across the Atlantic or living in the same hotel as for several months? Is it someone that you can get along with and things like you? And finally, the analytics. Are you capable of demonstrating all those intellectual skills that we looked at earlier? The analytic, the structured thought, the creativity, numerical ability, commercial judgment, all this sort of stuff. The best way of judging this is to have you in as an intern. And an intern is a great interview process on both sides. But there are very few internships around because they're expensive and they're not terribly productive. But it generally will lead to an offer unless you really blow out. But the process of getting an offer for an intern is every bit as difficult as getting a full offer. And it pays the same, generally. But if you can't get an internship, then there's the analytics screen. This is what you'll be put through several times, particularly if you're going into a strat firm. So there'll be, first of all, the quantifying and scaling problem. The thing that really seems off the wall. How many tennis balls are there in Spain? How many light bulbs are there on the Eiffel Tower? How many petrol stations are there in Germany? And the answer is not, haven't a clue. The answer is, how can I establish a basis for deriving a number? And you explain your thinking. Well, let's see. The village where I come from has a population of 3,000 and it's got 2 filling stations. So if I extrapolate from there to the entire population of Germany, then I would estimate that there are going to be, and then you can really put the icing on the cake by saying, and let's work it another way around. The average car does 10 litres per 100 kilometres, and the average person does 15,000 kilometres a year, and there are this many. Some way of going about establishing a reasonable number and validating it that shows you can be creative, analytic, think on your feet, juggle numbers, and come up with something that is realistic. Out-of-the-box thinking. Do you know the join the 9 dots thing? For those that don't, let me just say, this is where the phrase out of the box comes from. 9 dots, 3, 3, 3, using only 4 straight lines without lifting your pen or pencil from the paper, join all 9 dots in one go. The 3 light bulb problem, this is one that's on the BCG website, and at the end of the presentation I have got some other websites that have interactive case study interviews on them. So some of them are these kind of brain teaser type things, some of them are interactive, taking you through a case study, which is the final one. Generally these are scripted, they know the answers, and you will be led through a business problem by the interviewer, who will, if necessary, crank up the difficulty. And you have to be thinking about, okay, if I were a consultant and you were the client, how do I handle this? What's the thinking process I have to bring into play? The analytic screen, you'll probably have sessions on this, so I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but it is a supplement for having you in as an intern and saying, can we test this person's ability to structure an answer, to be numeric, creative, logical, fact-finding, the ability to add value and perform under stress? Because when you're in there working for McKinsey, charging $4,000 or $5,000 a day for your presence, you can bet the CEO is going to be pretty testing to say, okay, you're supposed to be really smart, prove it to me. And that's a pretty stressful position. Can you cope with that position? There are lots of things you'll find in books, probably in the Careers Centre, on the internet, about how to handle an analytic screen. This is a synthesis of what they all say. So golden rules: active listening, ask questions, make notes, go into the interview with a pad and pencil. No consultant ever goes in to see a client without a notepad. That's a kiss of death. So go into the interview, you're allowed to take notes. In fact, they're impressed if you do. Frame the question, establish your hypothesis. Well, it seems to me the area we need to look at is, you will be told if you're going the wrong way or if there's actually something, not deliberately, but it's, interesting point. But just for a moment, let's dwell on the issue of the delivery infrastructure, because there's some issues there we need to think about. So you'll be steered. Are you actively listening? Did you pick up the point that I don't want you to talk about that, I want you to talk about this? Use a strategic framework, some sort of strategic framework. Doesn't matter what it does matter what it is, but demonstrate that you are able to think in a strategic way, that we're using a 5 forces, a 3 Cs, a 4 Ps, a supply, whatever it may be, some kind of strategic framework to work through the issues and prioritise. Dialogue. Explain where you're going, what you're thinking. So if you are going off on a wrong tack, then you will be corrected. If you're right, you'll be getting the encouraging noises. So instead of just coming with the answer, well, explain where you're going with it. Key data, 80-20. Doesn't need to be done to the umpteenth degree because you're working on a hypothesis. Demonstrate creativity. This is not just a number crunching exercise. Anyone can be sent away to do some spreadsheet work. They want someone that can add value to what's going on. And last but not least, enthusiasm for the challenge. This is what you're saying you want to be doing for the rest of your life. So you need to be seen that this is something that actually excites you. This is what you get a buzz from. Is this a career for life? Let's assume you've got in, courtesy of doing some good case studies. What then? Well, the reasons that people leave consulting, and I've interviewed enough of them, and I can tell you these are the things given. Have you come across up or out? Do you know the phrase? In a number of the strat firms, McKinsey, BCG, Booz Allen, there's a process called up or out, which means you can expect to remain a consultant for 2, maybe 3 years. If you're not ready for promotion to the next level at about 2.5 years, you're going to have a meaningful discussion with your mentor. And it will be meaningful along the lines of, perhaps you should be thinking of a different career. That is up or out. It sounds quite frightening, and it keeps the blood fresh. But we'll touch on this. Lifestyle, desire for role and responsibility, lack of recognition. Let's just pick up the hello. Right. This was a survey of consulting firms, reasons that people were exited from the firm. Technical ability, they just didn't have the nous or the skills or the tools to make the grade, actually doesn't figure very highly. All of these, one way or another, are about they just didn't fit. That they, coachability, can they take feedback? The feedback process in consulting is vicious. It's not about let's be kind and make sure the person goes. It's this is perfection. That's what we need. This is the ways in which you are not perfect, and you need to do something about it. Take it as that. Take it as being constructive advice that says this is what you need to improve or do differently. And if you can't take it in that sense, then you will probably fall into the 31% that exit because they don't have the coachability or the emotional intelligence to cope with it, or they amount to pretty much the same thing. It's reasons that people don't work. Very little of it is because they just don't have the basic skills to do the job. Let's touch on up or out a bit more. The way I describe it and the way it was described to me when I first came across it, it sounded like every year 50% of the population are taken out and shot pour encourager les autres. Then if you take the numbers over a 9-year period for McKinsey, for Europe, and see what actually happens, you find, well, actually, for Europe, in the first year, just a couple of people left. But when you got to the first promotion point, then there was about a 20% cull. Not 50%, but after 2 years, 20%. For the next 2 years, nobody left. The next major promotion point, again, 20%. And then gradual attrition until MBA plus 8, so 9 years after the MBA, 27% had made it through to partner or near partner. And to be honest, 27% of an MBA population staying with a firm for 9 years, it sounds pretty good. I'm not sure too many other industries would have that kind of record. Just in case that was an anomaly for that particular McKinsey population, did the same exercise for half a dozen firms to see how it looked. And you get pretty much the same pattern. You'll notice there are some differences. BCG, for example, cuts deep early on. But once you've made the grade, and what they used to call Q, qualified consultant, then they say, okay, you are potentially partner quality. If you want to leave, fine, but we're not going to get rid of you. But the consistent measure in here, half-life of a strategy consultant is about 5 years. So again, if you're going into to the interview, you don't have to put up a pretense that I see myself here in 20 years' time. I'm really committed to this for the rest of my life. It's not true, and everybody knows it. Now, equally, don't say I'm here for 2 years, get the brand on my CV, and then I'm off. No, but to talk about 4 to 5 years is realistic. What else? The lifestyle, right, reasons for people leaving. The lifestyle can be demanding. Everything you've heard is true. Long hours, working at weekends, extensive travel, continual reviews and fairly critical reviews. The role changes all the whole time. If you're in a big audit type firm, then you can stay at the same position and just become an expert. But in the strat firms, you're continually under pressure to get better and make the next step in promotion. And the frustrations of having limited authority. You know what needs to be done with the client, you produce the report, and then you disappear. You don't know what happened. You don't know whether it's being used as a doorstop or whether it's turned the company around. So various frustrations that lead people to decide they want to move on. Do you remember a few slides back, we looked at the most desired employers for MBA graduates? That's before they graduate. This is the best companies to work for list for the US and the UK for 04. So in the top 100 best firms to work for, here are all the consulting firms which feature. And for the UK, yeah, it has actually got better. But I think the message here is they're working so hard they didn't have time to fill in the questionnaires about what a wonderful employer it is. So yes, it is tough, make no mistake about it. Except in OC&C in the Netherlands. If you've been in consulting and you want to move on, great opportunities. It's a great thing to have on your resume. These are some of the searches I've done over the last few years, where specifically people were looking for someone out of strategy consulting. They tend to be corporate roles, they tend to be strategic roles, because the idea is we'll bring in some talent into headquarters and then we can farm them out to line jobs later on. So, marketing manager for a leading online auction house that begins with E. Investment directors in private equity, consumer credit VP development, strategy director for the BBC. All the top firms saying Strat Consulting is wonderful experience. And if you look at some of the people that have been in consulting and moved on to other things, it's a pretty impressive list. This is just a selection from Booz, McKinsey, and I think there's a Bainey in there as well.
What's their position when they left the company?
Sorry?
What was their position when they left the consulting firm? They left the consulting firm
Yeah.
and they were partner or?
The absolute details of them, I can tell you about, let's say, Rich Fairbank. He was a partner in Mercer in their financial services practice, and he and another guy is a Brit who was a principal, did some work for an American bank. This is before you had variable credit rates, and they found that by doing a lot of number crunching, you found that there were high risk and low risk people. And they went to the bank and said, why don't you differentiate the offer between high risk and low risk people? And the bank wasn't interested. So they tried some other banks, and eventually they found a small one in Virginia that said, we like this idea, we'll fund you to start to set it up with us. And within a couple of years, that became Capital One. And Rich Fairbank is now worth about 500 million as the chairman of Cap One. Archie Norman was McKinsey, and he went into retail. Met him when I worked at B&Q. He was with Kingfisher as a finance director, where he was known as a brain on a stick. And then he became the chairman of Asda, and there's another one on there who's BCG. So generally they've moved out of consulting into senior jobs, been successful and grown from there. The last thing that I want to touch on, okay, we looked at up or out, lifestyle, which is harsh, desire for line responsibility, if you want that, yes, there are plenty of opportunities and plenty of people who've done it. Lack of recognition, just flag this up because I did interview someone once who was in exactly this position. They had the classic background, they were head of school in the UK, they got great A levels, they went on to Oxford, they got a first class honours degree, they went into industry where they were on a fast track management scheme, being mentored by a main board director, did really well, went off to B school, LBS, got their MBA, went into one of the B's and M's, and suddenly found that they weren't special anymore. They were cannon fodder, because everyone else had a first class honours degree and an MBA and fast track promotion through. And it just didn't work for that person, and they decided they wanted out. So be aware of that. Okay, I'm coming to the close, you'll be glad to hear. Conclusions from that. The The industry is exciting, dynamic, and provides exceptional challenge and reward for talented people. The market's recovering, but firms are still wary about over-recruiting. As I say, when partners have had a cash call, then they are not going to recruit in advance of selling the project. They want to make sure that the work is there before they recruit. So there is still a little bit of holdback in terms of recruitment. Competition for entry is tough. It always has been. It doesn't get any easier. Be proactive. Use your networks. You've got the alumni book for HSA. If you find someone who's in one of the firms, give them a call. They don't mind. They actually like the idea of giving advice to someone that's at their alma mater. And if they can get someone from there into the firm, it raises their own prestige. So don't be afraid of using your networks to give someone a call. What's it like in that firm? What are the issues? What should I be considering? They're generally very helpful. Performance in the selection process can improve. It's worth going online or testing each other both with brain teasers and with the case studies. You will get better. It's best to figure out how to do these things yourself rather than when you're sitting in front of a McKinsey partner and screw up at that point. Client requirements vary with economic climate. Target your application accordingly. Okay, it's a good time at the moment for the growth programs, so the big infrastructure programs, the strategy type work is growth at the moment. Consulting tracks economic growth. It gets hit early in a recession, but it recovers quickly as well. And we're seeing that with the numbers like the 7.5% growth year on year in the UK for last year. And again, finalising on the cake, the fact that during 02-03 there was restricted recruitment means that there's high demand now as the market picks up because there's a gap in the firms. And it means that promotion may actually be quicker than normal because the population that would otherwise now be at manager level aren't there. They haven't got the numbers, which makes it a good time for headhunters as well. Just to give you the answer on that, joining the 9 dots, the phrase think outside the box comes from the fact that mentally people see the 9 dots and draw a box around it. And in fact, the only way that you can do this is by thinking outside the box that you mentally drew around it. A few useful sites. Interactive case studies are certainly on those and a number of others. As I say, you'll get a hard copy of this, so you'll have these addresses. And here are some reference sites that do things like consulting magazines and so on, which are worth checking out to get your own feel of the consulting industry. My voice and my slides are now running out, so I'm open to questions if you have any. Yeah.
You told about the partners exiting the firm and their career jobs. What about people, managers or
Yep.
associates? What are the opportunities?
In going out and forming a boutique? Yep, absolutely. If you look at a couple of firms, Valoris in Spain and Delta Partners, which is actually in Dubai, but again came out of Cluster. Both of those were, I think there may have been one partner involved, but generally they were principals and managers. Greenwich, I don't know if you know Greenwich. It was managers from Capgemini's telco practice. Classic kind of thing. Well, quite honestly, we think we can take a couple of clients, or we can do this work on our own. We don't really need to be working for CGUI. So they went off, they formed their own business, running it the way they wanted. The last time I spoke with them, they had 200 people. That was after about 3 years. 100 and something in the Paris office, but they've also got operations in Germany, UK, Netherlands and Spain. And they were managers from CGUI telco practice. So yes, certainly it's possible. Yep.
Can you say a few words about consultant market of Western Europe?
Sorry,
Can you say a few words about consultant market of Western Europe?
consulting
Market of Western Europe.
Microsoft.
No, Eastern Europe.
Oh, Eastern. I'm terribly sorry. Yeah. Right. Happening everywhere. I mean, if you judge it by where are we being asked for salary surveys on, I mean, Poland is well established now. Most recently, we've been asked for Croatia. So, I'm terribly sorry. It's either Slovenia or Slovakia. I can't remember which one it was. Czech Republic is well established,
Russia.
and sorry.
Russia.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's a big market. And are you Russian? Oh.
No, themselves.
But you speak Russian.
Yes.
Fine. Again, if you think of it in terms of the consulting market is going to be not a direct function, but driven by both the size of the economy and the growth of the economy, then you get a pretty good steer as to where consulting is going to be popping up. And Eastern Europe is a big growth area at the moment, and that includes Russia. But all the majors are operating in Russia now.
Yesterday evening I was in a conference and there was a person who used to work for consulting firm, I think it was McKinsey, I don't know. And I don't have he explained that during his job he used to have some participations to industry, to firms
Uh-huh.
that he met during his work. Is it something common? I don't have the possibility to ask him how he succeeded to do that. Is it usual for someone, for a consultant, to put some money for clients, for his society like this? Or?
To bring clients onto the consulting team, do you mean?
It seems that he, during his consultant job,
Yeah.
he has been brought to put some money in firms for which he made some consulting.
Some shares.
Yes.
Taking equity in the client? Oh. The most successful private equity firm in the world is Bain Capital. To participate in Bain Capital, you have to be a Bain employee and ideally a Bain partner. And one of the OC&C I mentioned earlier, Outram Cullinan Company, Jeff Cullinan now runs Bain Capital. And clearly they have a good idea of when a concept, an investment opportunity has legs and when it doesn't. And if you look at the returns, even though it's closed to us mortals, the returns on Bain Capital are quite staggering, and it's one of the major revenue earners for the partners. As long as it's not insider trading, I'm not sure there's an issue. If you really believe in your client and what they're doing and what you're doing, then why is it a problem? Is that the issue? Providing it's not insider trading. I mean, if you're working on an M&A assignment for the client and you decide to buy shares, that I think would be frowned upon. Yeah. In fact, you probably end up in jail. Okay? Right, thank you very much.
Please visit us at www.agc.edu.